Mesdames et messieurs, une annonce. Il y a quelqu'un qui a perdu
An announcement, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody has lost a brown purse. If you found it,
if you happen to find it, please leave it at the accreditation desk. Thank you.
Should we start? Joe, ready? Should we start? Good. Good morning, all, and welcome to this segment of the session where we will be launching two of our reports. One of them is the economic report for Africa that ECA has produced this year, and then the other one is, of course, a book that's looking into the existential threats of the AFCFTA. And both of them, which is incredible, and I'll have colleagues that I will introduce soon, including our panelists also. I'm told that we do have 3 or 4 colleagues online that will be joining us on this conversation, but we have 2 or 3 more in the room, but I'll introduce them in a moment. But for me, a pleasure indeed to welcome you all. My name is Eunice, and I'm the director for ECA, the Southern African office. So you are, in a sense, in our backyard, and really happy and a pleasure to have you here with us. Before we go into the program, we will also have a remark on behalf of Dr. Hanan Mose, the Deputy Executive Secretary and Chief Economist of the Economic Commission for Africa, who due to other commitments, she's unable to be with us right now, but as you recall, she was with us in the previous session. But my colleague, so her statement and remarks will be delivered by my colleague, Dr. Mama Keita, who's the Regional Director for East Africa, also ECA based in Kigali.
Thank you, Eunice. Good morning, everyone. Yes, and welcome to the session. Like she said, I'm Mama Keita, Director of our office in Eastern Africa. Bonjour, je vais peut-être m'exprimer en français.
Good morning, I'm going to speak French. As Eunice pointed out, this session will be dedicated to launching 2 reports, which are extremely important, which are linked to all the discussions and conversations that started yesterday and will continue up until tomorrow. The first report is the Economic Report for Africa ERA. It is an annual report, and it is a flagship publication of ECA, which presents us the progress and also the opportunities and challenges in respect of the continent. This year, the ERA 2022 talks about digital technology, innovations, and how all this can be put to the service of development to increase value chains at the regional level. This is all in the context of the AFCFTA. We are aware of the fact that because of the multiple crises that are impacting the continent and continue to do so, the question on how to build on AFCFTA becomes even more an acute issue. The crises have given us a lot of problems, but a lot of food for thought at the same time in order to try and come up with opportunities deriving from this crisis. COVID has interrupted the supply chains in Africa and gives us the opportunity to see how technology can be put to the service of logistics in order to enhance trade in Africa. Also, the supply in essential goods becomes an issue of paramount importance, and therefore this report considers all this. The second publication that is going to be looked at during the course of this session equally talks about how to make sure that AFCFTA delivers the promises and the deliverables that it has. We talk a lot about the imperious need of promoting industrialization in this continent. AFCFTA is seen as the game changer that is going to promote this by making available the necessary market and also the demand and also the area in which all these things can be implemented. And the publication that my colleague George is going to present endeavors to see what is required to indeed make sure that AFCFTA comes up with all these promised deliverables. Now, without revealing any more, I would wish you all a very successful session. I hope it is going to be enriching for all of you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Mama, for those remarks, and indeed already scratching the surface in terms of what's contained in both of those reports, and really looking forward to those discussions. I certainly love company. I think I would take this opportunity to invite the panelists over before, of course, before they actually can engage with us. We'll have colleagues present both of those reports just to give us a snippet into what are the key issues coming out from both the book as well as the economic report for Africa. So allow me, and I see that I do have colleagues online, and I've seen to introduce Professor Fant Cheru, who's the Emeritus Professor of International Political Economy in the American University in Washington, D.C. He's also an Associate Fellow, Ethiopian Academy of Sciences. And welcome indeed, Prof, and looking forward to engaging with you. Also online is Ms. Maklet Germa Bekele. Although I don't see her yet, but hopefully that she'll be able to join us. She's a program manager of EU Technical Assistance Facility Support to the AFCFTA Secretariat. And the EU, of course, one of our key partners as ECA that are supporting us in the implementation of the AFCFTA. So welcome if you're here. Also, I did see Dr. Stephen Karenge, who's the Director, Regional Integration and Trade Division of ECA. He was also online a few moments ago. Dr. Mary Lucia Mbiti, I would like to welcome you to the stage at this point. She is the Senior Lecturer of Economics in the School of Economics, University of Nairobi, and the Director of Research at the Women Economic Empowerment Hub. Please welcome. Okay. Let me also welcome my good friend, former colleague, and somebody who's very passionate about AFCFTA, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot more in the conversation when she joins the conversation, Dr. Joy Kategekwa, who's a strategic advisor in the Regional Bureau for Africa in New York with UNDP. Welcome. And Joe, I know you're looking at me, but you're the presenter. Allow me to introduce Dr. Joseph Atamensa, who's the principal economic affairs officer with the macro governance division in ECA, but also who will present for us the book. And also allow me to welcome Dr. Maktasek, who's the Chief Technology Section, Technology, Climate Change, and Natural Resources Division of ECA, who is joining us online, and he's also the one that's going to present the economic report for Africa. So with that, again, colleagues, welcome to this session. And let me hand it over to Makta. If Makta, you're online, the floor is yours so you can take us through the ERA presentation. Just to keep in mind that you have 10 minutes, both the presenters will have 10 minutes, and then after that, we will engage in discussions with the panelists, and hopefully that we can also have a bit of time to engage with the audience. But over to you, Makta. You have 10 minutes to take us through the economic report.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Let me put in mode presentation. Great, I think I can start now. As you say, as introduced by Mama, the report, the economic report for Africa, it is a very important topic for UN Economic Commission for Africa. This year, the report focused on leveraging digital technology and innovation to improve regional value chain. This report was prepared by 3 key divisions: Technology, Climate Change, Natural Resource Division, RITD, and MGD. We work together, all these 3 divisions, to come up with this report. I think we don't have enough time to develop, to go through all these important reports, but let me share with you the methodology as well as the structure of the report. The methodology is based by a deep analysis of policy paper in several areas, in digital technology, in economic, in the safety, in e-trade. Why we come up with this report? And the structure of the report is as follows. We have a contextualization situation, provide introduction and the background, and also an overview of the value chain in Africa, regional value chain and national value chain. Also, the report goes through to the economic outlook 2022. We had one presentation during the COP22, and in this document we improved some data for this economic outlook. Also, but it is very important to assessing the Africa regional value chain in the context of the CFTA. And after that, we focus how digital technology can help to implement this regional value chain, as well as the challenge faced, and also policy recommendation for member state, private sector, and all parties. Now let me go to the Let me go to the next slide. What are the key findings of this report? We identify 10 key findings. First, is there is a lot of noise behind. I don't know what is what. Could you close switch off your micro, please? Because there is a lot of noise behind. So first key finding, it is a regional value chain is a critical component for African development. We have a lot of examples in the continent, how African continent can achieve this development through value chain. We have in the logistics side, in the transport, in manufacturing side, we have a lot of activity around the continent and a lot of opportunity for the continent with the implementation of the AEC. The FTA also will provide a lot of opportunity for local business. Already, build this African Trade Exchange platform, and you have seen one of the key opportunity of the value chain of the African AFCTA to boost this trade intra-African. So third, it is we get a lot of lessons learned from the COVID-19 as well as the Ukraine crisis, and also one example it is this platform I talked before. Emerging technology. We have seen even during the COVID that the technology, emerging technology, can help to boost this digitalization around this value chain, to improve this value chain in the continent. And we identified several technologies like the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, the cloud computing, 5G, broadband, 3D printing, blockchain, and Internet of Things. We have all this technology available in the continent, but we have to know how we use it to improve this regional value chain. And this technology shows that the increase and expand the regional value chain in the country and must be capitalized from this technology. We have several examples in the farm sector, in the manufacturing sector, in the continent, in several countries like Uganda, Kenya, South Africa. Also, this technology presents a lot of opportunity for Africa in terms of digital economy. As you know, this technology can boost the African economy by 2025 to $180 billion, this digital economy. Of course, to get benefits of this opportunity, we are facing several challenges in the continent, and this challenge can hamper the development of the value chain in the continent. We have to look at the issue of the infrastructure, the security, the regulation, capacity building, as well as skill development. We need also to harmonize our policy, because we are working not in one environment, but we are not working in several environments, because we are working at the continental level. We need to harmonize all this policy to make sure this technology will benefit for the continent and for the implementation of the CFTA. Of course, the last but not least, we need this multi-stakeholder, this partnership between private sector and public sector to develop this regional value chain. What key message we can take from this report? I'm not going to go all these key messages, but let me focus on one or three. On the value chain in African context, Africa participation in the value chain is most prevalent by its forward integration, where the rate of domestic value and export is predominant. Africa position in value chain is characterized by high concentration of export in primary product. It is something we have to overcome, because we focus on the primary product. The challenge also, we are facing several challenges in the development of the digital technology to impact this value chain. As you know, the continent need $100 billion to develop their infrastructure by 2030 to provide access to everybody, and this access, this infrastructure is important and very and necessary also for African countries to benefit this technology to impact their value chain. And there is a lot of challenges we have to overcome in the infrastructure side, while the partnership between private sector and public is very important to build this infrastructure. Another key message is we have a lot of policy recommendation in the e-commerce, e-payment, digital ID, as well on the policy regulatory, this blockchain technology, how we can use this technology, blockchain, the nanotechnology. We have several policy recommendations. There are the key element we can find on this report. Let me go quickly through, have a landscape of the digital technology impact on the value chain. As you know, the cross-border e-commerce is 1 billion, and which is 6 million was in trade. And Africa also less than 0.5% of the global e-commerce. And this is a focus concentrate in 10 countries. Yeah. You know, in Africa, 10 countries 90% of the online business is focused in 10 countries. It's something I think we have to look at carefully in this meeting to see how we can expand this online e-trade in other countries. And Africa GDP also is very important. And it is some key funding on this report. Let me go through to the impact on the technology. We have a lot of noise behind. Yeah, I don't know where it's coming.
Not on our end, Mata.
Yeah.
Maybe your side. We are fine here. Yeah, you can go on.
Yeah. All right. Now let me focus on the impact some digital technology on regional value chain. Let me take the case of the artificial intelligence on the value chain, because this artificial intelligence can improve the prediction in the future trend in the consuming demand, also in the I think the noise is on your side. Yeah, this one disturbs me very. And this manufacturer, this artificial intelligence also can be used in the industrial sector, in the manufacturing sector, to improve the productivity. It's something very important. Also in planning and to reduce the cost on time. Also, this artificial intelligence can help on this manufacturing side, as well as for the fraud prevention and the tracking system. We can use this artificial intelligence to track all the goods. We have some example around East Africa, where this artificial intelligence provide a lot of added value to tracking the goods from the different countries in East Africa. It is some example of the artificial intelligence component, the contribution of the artificial intelligence in the regional value chain. Internet of Things also is very important for the regional value chain. We have the same example with the farmer, how to use this technology to increase their productivity. We are running now one project in Botswana. AEC is running one project in Botswana using this artificial intelligence to improve the farmer production. Also, we can use it in the chemical manufacturers, this Internet of Things. Also, it is very important to use it to enact IoT for camera to spot, detect, and reject to product. We can, with this Internet of Things, we can know exactly if there is a mistake on this product or not, and after that we can decide to put in the market or not. This is something very interesting in Internet of Things. Artificial intelligence also very important. It is why ECA has set up this artificial research center in artificial intelligence in Congo. And this one will contribute a lot to how to use artificial intelligence to improve value chain in the implementation of the FCTA in the continent. Of course, the blockchain is very important. I'm not going to talk too much to blockchain because blockchain is very important for in the regional value chain for the traceability of the transaction, reduction of the cost for the smart contract, and to track also the origin of product. This is very important because when we develop this ATEC platform, we are based on the rule of origin, and blockchain can help to identify the origin of this product. It is very important to improve also this regional value chain. We have some example around the continent using a blockchain for cross-border payment also in several countries. Just as in Ghana, we have a very good example people using this technology. Nanotechnology also we can use it in the food processing, in drug delivery, in the construction, also in monitoring health. It is a technology not very well developed in the continent, even around the world. but it is very important also to improve this regional value chain, and African country can benefit from this technology, as we are starting now to develop this nanotechnology around the world, such as in the health sector for the medical product, pharmaceutical product. It is something very important also to improve the quality of this project in the regional value chain. Let me go to the challenge, because we highlight the benefits of this technology to improve this regional value chain in the implementation of the CFTA. But despite this, we are facing in Africa on several challenges. First, we are facing challenge on the infrastructure side and the connectivity. As you know, we are now 33% of our population connected to internet. Means around more than 900 million doesn't have any connectivity, are offline. To make this regional value chain benefit for everybody, we need to build the infrastructure and to improve the connectivity. Of course, we need to also to develop a sound regulation in order to attract the private sector in this digital era to use this technology to improve the regional value chain. Also, the security is very important, because the security is cybercrime costs 10% of the Africa GDP. And when we talk about using digital technology for value chain, we need to have a secure environment, secure network, and Africa need also to develop a secure environment through this regulatory capacity building. Why AEC also is established now with the government of Togo, the African Center on Cybersecurity. Of course, I talk about several new technology, emerging technology like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, blockchain, 5G, 3D printing. We need to also develop the skills in this area. Yeah, Africa need to have people with sound capacity building on this area, because as you know, 90% of the new job by 2030 will be digital or will need a component digital. For African country to benefit of this technology to impact the regional value chain, we need to build the capacity. Also, increase the data consumption and data storage. We need to have our own, it is what we call as a digital sovereignty, something we need also, and to overcome to the challenge of this digital of the data. Yeah. Now, recommendation to go faster. We following this challenge, and also the impact that digital technology can put in the regional value chain, and the current situation in the continent, and where we are in the implementation of the CFTA, and also the economic outlook of the continent. We come with some key recommendation in several key sectors. On the infrastructure and service, of course, we have to build this infrastructure and also put the sound regulation to attract private sector in this area to develop this application for value chain. On the digital ID also, we need a participation of all population, all African in this development of the regional value chain. As you know, 5 million.
Magda, I will ask you to wrap up. If you can wrap up in a minute, that would be great.
I almost done. Thank you. I almost done.
Thanks.
And digital ID, we need also to provide this digital ID to 500 million people. Also to infrastructure payment. We need to develop this e-payment infrastructure, but one of the key element now is at X. E-commerce also, because as you know, 90% of the e-commerce in the continent is concentrated only on the 10 countries. We have to develop this e-commerce through putting laws, capacity building, also e-payment system. Also very important to build this capacity. All we talk in this digital technology, this regional value chain, this implementation of CFTA to get the benefits from the digital economy, the e-economy, we need to build the capacity, such as the capacity of the young generation. It is very important because by 2050, 70% African will have under 35 years. And why AEC has an important program to build as a new generation in digital skills, and we are working closely with the tech officer to prepare this summit, the summit of the future in 2024, focus to the adoption of the global digital compact. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to stop there, and I will share the presentation with the organizer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Magda. I think for taking us through the report. We will have an opportunity to go through a lot of the recommendations that you're putting, but also a lot of the issues that you're raising in there. But I think the bigger message is really how digitalization will unlock. It has a lot of potential to turbocharge the AFCFTA, but also the development of regional value chains, which I think is a good bridge to go into our next paper, which is talking to similar issues on the AFCFTA and how we can see its implementation for the next 10 to 15 years. And we were just speaking before we came on stage before to say, I think there's a lot that has gone in, a lot of work that has gone into AFCFTA, making sure that countries are getting prepared, developing those national developments, the strategies for AFCFTA and so on. I think it's the next mile, the last mile that is more critical, which is implementation. So, Joe, I'm hoping that the book speaks to some of those priorities that will move the AFCFTA forward from where we are now in terms of books, strategies, and so on to more implementation. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just want to have a conversation with you. The conversation I want to have with you is about the CFTA. You can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Is the slide on? So I want to tell you, I said I want to have a conversation with you. And the conversation is mainly to tell you about what we need to do so that we can accelerate the implementation of the CFTA. And I'll tell you why we wrote this book. So, we were in Ghana, I was in Ghana, to go and organize a mission, organize a conference on CFTA, and I was there with David Luke, and the borders closed of COVID. And then we realized that there's going to be difficulty in terms of the implementation of the CFTA. And some of us felt that, you know, whether COVID or no COVID, it should happen. But it didn't happen, and we're very frustrated. So a group of us, these people on the screen, decided that why don't we channel our frustration of COVID, frustration with COVID, frustration with the CFTA being delayed, implementation and all that. Why don't we channel that effort into something more productive? So we said, what would it take? What would it take for integration, for implementation of the CFTA to happen? Mind you, there was so much enthusiasm when the CFTA was signed in Kigali. 44 heads of states signed. And within a record time, we had the ratification done. And some of us wished that I, as a Ghanaian in Mauritius, I was hoping that I'll find Ghana chocolate, right? And I'm hoping that I'll see Kashmir from Mauritius in Nairobi. We just don't care about the regulations and what have you. What people want, what the Africans want is trade. They don't care about your talk. All they care is trade. So what can we do so that we can have different African products on different shelves so that coffee from Ethiopia would be on the breakfast of a Mauritian here in Mauritius? Why can't they be? Why can that happen? So that's what we did. So the book, you all have copies. I think you can have a copy around. But I just want to tell you that it's in 3 parts. And I think some of us believe strongly that it's true trade. It is true trade that we can get ourselves out of poverty. It is true trade that we can solve our debt situation, because debt you pay through your current account or your capital account, and current account is just your exports minus imports. So once you get excess, you'll be able to retire your debt. So that is why trade is important. But what has the CFTA done? Everywhere you go, people talk about the CFTA. What it's done for us is that it's given us a collective voice to speak about. That's what you hear about. Mainly the common voice of Africans yearning for trade. So that is good. But what is the CFTA anchored on? The CFTA is anchored on our dream, my dream, that one day, those borders which were erected in 1844 by colonialists who came into Africa for the scramble for Africa and decided that this place would become Mauritius, that place would be Ghana, that place would be Benin, this would be South Africa. What we are yearning for is those borders would collapse and we will return to what we were as one Africa, an Africa that we are all free to go through freely. And when I come to Mauritius, nobody at the airport would ask me, why am I coming here? That is the Africa that we are hoping for. And that is the Africa which the youth that I talk to most often. I like hanging around the youth so that I become cool. But what they want, for them, they don't see anything about whether they are Mauritians or whether they are Ghanaians or whether they are South Africans. In the youth, I have tremendous faith in them because they see themselves as Africa. And through digitization, we'll get there. So regional integration is very, very important for us. So these three things, the voice, a common voice to come collectively together, and because we believe that when you have regional integration, when you have the 55 economies of this country, of this continent, integrated as one, we are more powerful. We go next week, we are going to go to Washington. Our leaders are going to go there and talk to one head of state, 55 heads of states against one. Then the next time, 55 heads of states will go to Japan, talk to them. The next time, 55 heads of states will go to where? God knows where, Turkey, somewhere. Anybody. This is wrong, in my personal opinion. It's wrong. We have to be strong enough to know that we are one. We are powerful. So we've got to start changing our mentality about this poverty mentality, that we always think that because of we are poor, we have to go and beg. I think collectively, if you look at the reserves sitting in the central banks of African total reserves, it's more than India, but we still think we don't have resources and therefore we have to beg. So that's one thing that I think we want to live with, to change that mentality. The other thing that we also realize that if we are going to have the CFTA, you need to develop the capacities of the countries to be able to implement. And that is where I applaud my colleagues in the African Trade Policy Center, in the ECA, for the fantastic job they are doing in terms of going around countries and making sure that they have the national strategies for the implementation of the CFTA. So if you've not seen that and it's not happened to you, just write to our executive secretary and my good friend, the coordinator, Malaku Desta, will make sure that we'll visit your country and help you to have that strategy that you need for implementation. So that is good. You have to build the capacities. We need that. Again, the other thing that we realize is that for us to be able to have the CFTA and have the goods and services that you need to trade on, you cannot say that you don't have electricity. You need affordable and access to electricity. And so the just energy that we're talking about, we don't care whether it's a green or whatever the manufacturer, the industrialist would want to be assured of that electricity to be able to produce. So it is important that you get affordable electricity, and it's high time that we collectively think of how we can make energy accessible to all Africans on the continent. And that, to me, it is important. But you cannot get yourself into this CFTA or the African Continental Free Trade Area if you are not competitive. Because barriers, tariffs are going to come down. And when tariffs come down, we don't want this argument of the infant industry argument that we need to keep tariffs up so that we can trade. No, we're going to tear down the barriers. You have to remain competitive. You have to be innovative in order to be able to look at your comparative advantage, what you have in abundance that you could be able to use for your production so that you can trade efficiently. It is important for you to remain competitive. But as we always say, you cannot develop, you cannot move if you're only interested in only the men on your continent. It wouldn't work. You need each and every one. And therefore, the empowerment of women, and when we're talking about empowerment of women, we're not talking about empowerment of women in the sense that, women are in the board, are given a seat somewhere because they are here. But we want women to have the power as the same as men. Not necessarily about promotion. People talk about women promotion. Fine, that's good. But we want women to be captains of industries, and therefore they should be given the access to credit. We don't want a situation where a woman wants credit, he needs a man to go and co-sign. That is wrong. We need to change that. And so therefore, what we are talking about, that if we want our CFTA to be successful, then what we need to do is to ensure that we empower women, they have access to credit, they can also be contractors who can construct roads, they can be in boardrooms, they can recruit, they have the same power that the men have, so that we can be more effective. We need everyone. However, I go back to the point. How can you trade if you cannot move? Yes, you can just sit somewhere online, do that. But like I said, if we really want to create that common market, if we really to have to create those goods that would help us to trade, then we've got to allow people to move freely, right? We've got to allow, I don't support, not that I don't support, it's a good step that I know the ADB are going to tell us about the open visa index to check whether how many visas you can get on arrival, and people plot themselves that you can arrive in Ghana and you can get visas on arrival for Africans. That's not what we are looking for. What we are looking for is, give me that common passport. Give me that African passport, which allows me to move freely. Give me that, and then you can talk about free movement. But I understand, you're raising concerns about security. You're raising concerns about identity. You're raising concerns that, I'm a criminal. So I'm telling you, as countries, 55 countries, share intelligence, share civil registration, know where I was born, know where I come from, but then allow me to move. And I don't have to be asked questions. When you go to Europe, in the Schengen countries, you move freely. Nobody asks you a question. Why is it that in Africa we fear ourselves? We fear ourselves that we want to come into a country, they ask you, what are you coming to do? Do I have to give you a reason if I want to come and chill in beautiful Mauritius? Should I give you a reason? I'm an African. By virtue of being an African, please let me move. And that is what the youth are calling for. That is what we want. However, I'm wrapping up. 2 minutes, I'm done. However, what you also have to do in terms of your CFTA, we need to make sure that we have innovation, technology, and all that. We also have to be in a position to address whatever shocks we have. In terms of the pandemic has taught us that we need to plan better. We need to have the resources to be able to address the shocks that we have. And lastly, education, stupid. To get the Africa that we want, we need to educate so that we get the Africans that we want. We want an African that is well educated. We want an African that is innovative. We want an African that is savvy, financially, everything. So with the African, if we educate through education, whether STEM education or whatever, that will give us enough Africans that we want so that we can achieve the Africa that we want. Sorry. So that is the summary. What is this group of people who I put on the board? What is our next project? Our next project is we want to tackle the question of the common market. What would it take for us to get a common market? We also want to look into the question of the common currency. I'm tired of people saying that because it didn't work in Euro and the challenges, and therefore Africa should not have a common currency. We need a common currency. We need a common currency, and that is how we can protect ourselves from the shocks of exchange rates. Because that's what we did. If we have collectively, we're one powerful economy, and we have one currency, one central bank. I know people fear that when you have a common currency, you lose your ability to conduct monetary policy. But no, that is what we can do it. We can do that. So that is what. And the other thing we are we're talking about amongst ourselves is if we get the right people, some people are here to help us, is to create an African Council on Global Affairs. We would like to have an African Council on Global Affairs that would be able to, just like the Council on Foreign Relations in America, to be able to speak on issues and to be able to set agenda on issues that, so this is what we spent our time doing during the COVID. With our frustration, this is what we produce. I thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Joe, for having a conversation with us and for unpacking the book, which it does have 3 parts, and I think he said it out well. One of them, which is the first chapter, is a lot around the African context. And then, of course, the big issue of regional integration, which speaks to a lot of the issues that you've raised, including free movement of people, but also the common market. When you dive into some of the recommendations, common market, common currency, and so on, that falls a lot more on regional integration. You spoke to issues around productive capacities, whether it's energy as an accelerator for a lot of the AFCFTA, but also production, goods and services, and so on, critical skills and so on. Again, very, very critical in terms of the AFCFTA, and of course the enabling environment, and that which also speaks to the issues that the economic report on Africa had in terms of innovation, technology, and so on. I think this sits very well in terms of, trying to summarize the book. And so there you have it. Like I mentioned before, I think the 2 reports, or one report or 2 knowledge products that we have, the issues are quite similar, all centered and underpinned by AFCFTA. And I think a good ground to have a conversation going forward. So we'll see how much we do in terms of time, but I would like to hear from our panelists, and maybe to start, have a 3 minutes take on both of those. And if we do have a lot more time, maybe we can have a lot more contributions from the floor in terms of what you think the priorities should be. With that, I would like to, first of all, and perhaps I'll start with Stephen here, especially as we speak about regional integration. Again, for both of those, a lot has been spoken to. If you can speak to a little bit more in terms of how do you see, and the propositions that are coming from the book, for example, how feasible is that, and how you see the opportunities as well. 3 minutes, Stephen, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Karenge. And I'm quite pleased to be participating in this session of this meeting. Joe has actually done a very good job in, first of all, giving the context under which we had this project. And I think my response to your question, Eunice, is more to do with the 2 points, the three bullets that he finished with. The issue of the common market, the issue of the and also the question of the Universal Council of Universal Affairs for the continent. Now, the AFCFTA, of course, as we know it, is going to bring down the barriers. It's going to remove. It's going to lead to a lot of reforms in our institutions as countries come up with their national strategies and their national committees to ensure their implementation. But unfortunately, we are not going to get optimal results from the AFCFTA if we do not take our regional integration agenda to its logical end. And the logical conclusion of the regional integration in our continent is the ability of factors of production, including the people, being able to move across the continent. So the figures that have been published by the different institutions that have been working on the AFCFTA, we have simulations showing where we will be by 2045. Now, those numbers, that increase of trade will not happen unless it's possible for the private sector, especially the private sector operators, to be able to move from one country to another. And also, as the comparative advantages are enjoyed by each of the economies, the producers are able to source their talent, the best talent, from anywhere in the continent to where the production process is going to take place. So, if you are to ask me, we are unlikely to optimize on the benefits of the AFCFTA unless we get all the 4 freedoms that are required for you to have a completely integrated economic space. And I would also want to conclude by saying that even as we do that, we need to be cognizant of the changing geopolitics. The changing geopolitics are actually working in favor of Africa if we fully implement the AFCFTA and also take seriously the whole issue about the Africa Economic Community, because the shortening of the supply chains, this changing geopolitics of the reshoring gives us an opportunity to also build our competitiveness, and the AFCFTA offers this opportunity. So that's what I would like to say for now, just to emphasize that the AFCFTA is good. We have demonstrated it's good. There is no more argument about it. But if you really want to go to the full frontier of the benefits that the AFCFTA promises, we need to go to the next mile, the customs union, all the way to the free movement of people and persons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen, again, touching on the critical issues. And I remember in my other life, when the whole discussion of AFCFTA started, I was one of the naysayers. I said, we've been talking about this for decades, AFCFTA, regional integration, and so on. And a lot of it is actually underpinned by political dynamics as well, in some sense. I think we have moved leaps and bounds from decades ago, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. But let me turn to Professor Fant, especially that we're talking about all the political dynamics underpinning regional integration, and of course, therefore, the implementation of the AFCFTA. What do you think? See, again, first of all, to the 3 propositions that Joe ended on in terms of the common market, common currency, and whether it's a board or whatever that moves this. But where do you see and how do you look at the political dynamics that would be able to, push the AFCFTA forward.
Good morning, and thank you very much. Joe has spoken passionately, so I don't have to repeat myself. I think this is a very important book, a very important contribution, but I'm going to focus on two areas. This is basically on part 2, which they call high impact areas, and part 3 on key priorities and existential challenges. On part 2, definitely, rightfully so, they have defined energy as an important area, and not only just energy cost, but the need to expand our investment on energy infrastructure, a very critical one. Secondly, on textile and clothing, which I have some question, because everybody from Bangladesh to Mexico is in travel. I'm not sure that is an important pathway to the future. But let me add a third and high impact area, which is not included in the book, which is agriculture. In light of what the continent is currently experiencing with shortages, escalating cost of food, lack of critical agricultural inputs, not to mention the devastating impact of climate change, I'm surprised that agriculture has not been included as a high impact area. Relative, I think what the war in Ukraine has exposed is the vulnerability of the continent as a result of its high dependence on food and fertilizer from Russia and Ukraine. So I think agriculture must be developed on its own right. It is a sector of high growth potential. Indeed, the priority task of agricultural revolution for several decades to take is obviously complex and multifaceted, but I think we need to give that the sector have to be given priority, because we cannot go on begging for food until the next ice age. Coming next would be really the part 3 is the area where ERA 2022 and the book comes together. Here again, the key issue of unlocking barriers to technology innovation. Here is the critical area, which is the issue of African higher education system. Particularly higher education reform constitutes the most important pillar for Africa's future. But the message appeared in the epilogue of the report rather than being centrally placed. Here, I guess, the centrality of higher education for transformative sustainable development is greater than ever as the fourth industrial revolution accelerates. Sadly, here is where I would put a cold shower to the debate. I have to report to you as an educator, the state of education in Africa, including higher education institutions, is truly depressing. The system is riddled with so many problems that I do not have the time to enumerate. So African higher education institutions are no more the critical learning and knowledge production system. They have been totally neglected for a long time. In this context, I think we are trying to have a conversation on the future of digitalization in Africa. We need to be honest about ourselves, about the state of education. Here, let me zoom in the areas of research and development. The question of research and deserves extended comment, really. According to UNESCO, Africa spends only 0.59% of GDP on research and development compared to a global average, about 2%. So Africa's low level of investment in research and development translates into low science, technology, and innovation indicators. In terms of patents, for example, in 2018, Africa accounted for 17,000 patent applications, while Asia led globally with 2 million applications. So we have a lot of work to do. In terms of research output, is extremely very low, particularly when it comes to scientific publication. Our share is about 3.5% compared to Asia's 48%. Finally, African higher education system in terms of international education ranking, only 60 African universities were included in the 2021 World University Rankings of about 1,500 universities. So indeed, digitalization is critical for Africa's transformation. However, digitalization has to be underpinned by a robust research and development environment, high quality teaching in science and technology, and the state of art of educational infrastructure. So learning and a sound technological base provide critical element as effective ecosystem for innovations. So this element has to be as part and parcel of the debate on the continental trade issue. So the question that I leave is to colleagues here, what would it take for Africa to move up the technological ladder and tap into the digital revolution that's transforming the world over? So in that sense, this question is very critical for us to achieve what is in the book called Digital Africa. How do we get to Digital Africa? The basic issue we have to do is higher education. Let me end finally with the political economy issue. Generally, I'm talking about the political economy of governance. Three issues that matter the most for me at the end of the day. First, visionary leadership matters for moving forward the reform agenda. Second, pragmatism and policy innovation do matter. Thirdly, instituting a culture of learning by doing also does matter. In this regard, I consider this book as a first installment toward a long conversation we have to have in terms of how to transform Africa. Thank you. I'll stop right here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof, for raising those issues. And I actually would like to align and agree with you when you spoke about some of those value chains. So agriculture absolutely playing a critical role for Africa. There's a lot, for example, that we're doing within our region is to try and develop agricultural value chains, for example, because we see that's where we also get a lot. And thanks for raising some of those barriers to innovation, technology and innovation, and as well as ending on the political economy side. I think all very well taken. And I think to transition from you, which is a good one, I would like to turn to Dr. Mbiti, because some of just listening to Makta when he was presenting some of those facts, and this is coming to the digital gender divide. A lot of the traders that we have now, of course, are women. So if you look at the numbers in terms of cross-border trading, but also just small and medium type size enterprises and businesses are really are women. But we do see that digital divide. What, in your view, should we be looking as development partners, but also as governments that can help bridge that gap that we have?
Thank you very much. Let me start by observing that one of the objectives of African Continental Free Trade Area is inclusion and also to achieve gender equality. Gender equality, if we are to define it, it is really to do with equal access and ownership of factors of production, as well as to opportunities that come up for trade, including in the African Continental Free Trade Area. The issue of gender inequality is a reality, not only in Africa, but over the globe. The recent, or really the World Economic Forum for 2021 observes that globally it will take 135 years for the world to achieve gender equality. Issues of access, equal access to factors of production to both women and men. For Africa, it has been estimated that this will take about 145 years to achieve equal access of both of resources, factors of production, and opportunities that come up between women and men. So it is important for the region as we look forward to taking advantage of the opportunities that are coming up with the African Continental Free Trade Area to look at the issue of gender inequality and bridge that gap, whether it is in the digital defined, whether it is in the businesses themselves and so on, so that we can have women and men participate in the regional trade equally. If we have gender equality, then we are likely to see better outcomes of African Continental Free Trade Area. Also, if you look at the existing statistics, we find that the countries, African countries that have a larger gender gap also tend to have lower per capita GDP. And so it is important for the region as we move forward, if we want to achieve better outputs of Continental Free Trade Area, if we want to achieve better objectives or outcomes of development and optimal development, we need to look into the issues of inclusion as well as gender equality. More specifically to trade and in the regional trade, we find that if you look at women's businesses, and especially the micro, small, and medium enterprises, and especially those that are involved in regional integration or in regional trade, we find that women businesses are lower, and that they have, as compared to the profits are lower, and also productivity is lower as compared to the male-owned small-scale businesses. And we have many women and men involved in cross-border trade or intra-regional trade who are in the category of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Now, women are much more impacted upon because of the barriers that exist, both that are existing for the intra-regional trade, and we know that there are many related to standards and market access and many other challenges, trade facilitation and so on, and infrastructure that is necessary for intra-regional trade. We find that women are more negatively impacted or bear a lot of these barriers because of the nature of their businesses, most of them being informal, being much smaller, and again, because of the burden of care work, which women do, very much more frequently and with, of course, a lot of love. But it means when they spend more time in the care work, then they spend less time in those market activities which contribute to regional integration and for the income for themselves as well as for the family and as well for the region. So it is important as we move along and harness the gains of African Continental Free Trade Area to look at practical ways in which we can empower women, which women can be supported to better participate in intra-regional trade. We can learn from different programs that have been implemented in the region. In COMESA, for instance, and East African Community, they have implemented the simplified trade regime, which applies to all the micro, small, and medium enterprises. But of course, because women account for about 75% of the women involved in cross-border trade, they benefit a lot from that program. There are also good examples from other regional bodies. We have examples from SANDC, we have examples from ECOWAS, in which as a region we can be able to learn to empower women to better participate in the regional trade and get the benefits of African Continental Free Trade Area. I know that a framework for African Continental Free Trade Area on a gender protocol is being developed. But we have also seen that really since the the Lagos Plan of Action. A lot has been done with regards to framework and integrating women into the economy. And it is a time we look forward and go beyond, those frameworks and those agreements which provide for women economic empowerment and women integration, but also go to implementation and implement programs that for real empower women. We need to look, for example, at those programs that can provide information, because one of the key challenges we find is that women still may not understand much of the requirements related to intra-regional trade and the preferences that are available, and they continue to trade, and blocked, or they are not really blocked, they don't gain from such benefits that come with the preferential trade area. We also need to look at access to networks, and more so, we need to harness, women collectives, because all over in Africa, women have come together in groups in whichever way they call it. Is it associations? Is it women groups? Is it whatever they do? And they have tried to build social capital, and they have been able to use that to contribute to economic development. So we can also harness this as a region and contribute to women economic empowerment. And lastly, as we talk about the border infrastructure, we need to think about those services and that infrastructure that can contribute to women, to reducing the burden of care on women, including supply of childcare services for the women that are involved that have small babies and would like to trade across the border, and also easy access to medical services where women can easily take the children and they'll be able to continue with their trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for that contribution. And you've raised a lot of issues, and part of it, I like the way you said we have to look into practical ways for women to participate in trade. I think for those that are in the space for long, I think we're talking a lot more in terms of non-trade barriers, and I think there are a lot. You've spoken to many of them, including access to information, but in a way that they can actually understand, but also some supportive infrastructure, organization, collectives, and so on, which indeed would be able to help women in the space, but also move the AFCFTA forward. Let me check, because I can't see here whether we do have Ms. Girma on the line. If not,
yes, I hope you can hear me, and you will excuse me for my camera. Thank you.
Not a problem. I'll come to you a little later, but allow me to turn to Joy, who I like to call the AFCFTA promoter in chief. We've heard a lot. I think there are a lot of opportunities, but both the book, but also the economic report also spoke to some challenges as well. Where do you see, given all of that, in terms of the opportunities, but also the challenges which are real to make it work? How do you see the AFCFTA forward? We've seen a couple of years or so that we've started in terms of laying the groundwork and so on. But where do you see the opportunities? Where should we put our priorities on to be able to accelerate and move the AFCFTA?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Eunice, for your excellent moderation. Thanks to Joel for the kind invitation to participate in this conversation. What a wonderful book. This is a book whose time has come. And what we have to think about is how to look at those threats and dismantle them. Because I think if we don't have a clear focus on that, we will be theorizing in perpetuity about the importance of trade-led growth for Africa's sustainable development. So I'd like to start with a word that Makta said. He talked about captive value chains. And I'd like to sort of borrow that the idea of captivity, and talk about capture, how we are captured, and how we get out of it to get us to the opportunities that you talk about, Eunice. I think the AFCFTA at this point in time is in a state of capture. Capture of non-implementation. Capture of non-focus on utilization. Capture on non-manageability of what non-AFCFTA parties do, i.e. third countries. Capture of the non-movement of people. And capture of a model of capacity building that has failed us to this point in time. And then I'll share thoughts about how to go big. So let's first talk about capture of implementation. When you think about it, we had such a huge political momentum, and Joe has done an excellent job reminding us about all of that. But I think we've looked at implementation as something that suffices when we have the secretariat, when we have its staffing, when we have the committees, and the process is ongoing. That's important because they play an important oversight role in the implementation. But I don't think the AFCFTA will reach its full potential if we don't think about implementation practically as a question of readiness within the policy, institutional, administrative framework of countries to offer that treatment which the AFCFTA has promised. And so we have to shift our lens from that kind of implementation into accelerated readiness in the countries. The second type of capture is this question of non-utilization. All of my close to 20 years now in the practice of trade and trade for development, I realize that we've done Africa a disservice by not focusing on utilization of opportunities in trade agreements. So we've mastered the art of creating these opportunities. The AFCFTA builds on what we had in the Rex. But somehow we're not concerned about the fact that we haven't looked hard into the question of productive capacities, trade-related infrastructure, the practical things that Mary was talking about. What do women face when they're trying to engage in trade? And how many of our institutions and our thinking are finding women at that place of standards, are finding women at that place of financing? We write great reports about them. But I think there's something that can be shifted there. The third capture is negotiations. I think we've negotiated ad infinitum. We did phase 1, banked it, moved quickly to phase 2. It's now in legal scrubbing, at least parts of it. But I think we need to take a stop and say, what if we focused on implementation of phase 1 only and got something concrete out of it? Because I think the fatigue with negotiations is that they create these opportunities. But because we're not looking at utilization, we're spectating at them right now. The capture of the inability of people to move, and I think, Joe, you made that point, that let Africans move. The way movement has been designed in the AFCFTA is to focus around movement for services provision. And we know that that's a very tiny part of it, where you let people, mostly highly skilled people, get around. That is a problem. And so we have to think about getting out of the capture of people not moving. And then the question of third parties. Here we are talking about the AFCFTA and how great it is, but we also know that there are some African countries that are currently engaging in parallel process of negotiations for free trade areas with some of the world's strongest players on the trade space. And so how do you create an environment where you give the AFCFTA a chance to stand up, to walk, to move? So let me talk about some solutions now, and the whole idea of going big. We had it figured out in the beginning, and then we forgot it. This idea around boosting intra-African trade and the action plan on boosting intra-African trade. In a sense, it had everything figured out there. So finance, infrastructure, factor market integration, productive capacities. And then we went to what's easy, which is to create the legal instrument. We've done many over the years. But I think it's time to really shift from trade policy, trade negotiations, into industry, and a focus on those great blueprints we have at the AU. You have PIDA, you have IDA, is it called IDA? And you know, all of those sorts of things. I think that shift towards industry is critical. The next big thing is to go big on effective capacity building and really try to get off the pedal of this idea that trade capacity building is about training, or trade capacity building is about another report, or is about some policy advice. It has not lifted the numbers. And so how do we do a version of trade capacity building that meets women where they are practically? I think when we start to do things like that, something will shift. I'll tell you a short story. UNDP invested in these women in northern Ghana, Tamale, it's called. These women produce shea butter. Their challenge with exporting is that they don't have certification. So you come to these women over a series of capacity building initiatives and tell them about the opportunities, and tell them about policies, and tell them about the report you've launched. They're not moving anywhere from that point. And so what we did is try to understand and work with them what will get you certification, and went through the motions. We went back a year later and were welcomed by boxes ready to export. This is what I think effective trade capacity building should be. And I'd like to challenge all of us engaged in this space to really accept that the model we have has watched, at the very least, known progress, and to move away from it. And so the final point really is around going big on women and going big on her AFCFTA. Mary did an excellent job talking about that. So maybe I won't get into much of the details on that. But basically, in sum, to say, we have to accept we're in a state of capture. We have to accept that we're part of the solution in getting up out of that capture, and that getting out of that capture is really about self-reflection, breaking that frame because it's not working, and going big on some of the elements I shared. Thank you.
Thanks so much again, Joy. Always a pleasure to listen to your passion where trade is concerned. And you've put it rightly in terms of, capture, issues of implementation. And I like that you started with that. And added to that, perhaps I would also say, and this is coming from a discussion that I had a few months ago with the Minister of Finance from Eswatini. And he said, it's great, ECA, you're doing great work in terms of FCFTA and so on, but where are the products? Because if you look at my import bill, I import almost everything. So back to the issue that you're talking about in terms of industry, I think it's the basics. Unless we start producing the goods to trade, I think we can talk all we want and it won't move anywhere. So thank you so much for those thoughts. And last but not least, Mahlet, apologies again, I couldn't see you. So great that we have you online. And I'm not sure what take you're coming from, whether from as EU, but also as somebody who has just been able to listen to the conversation and you would like to come in as well. I'll give the last word to you very quickly because I also see that I'm standing between lunch and ourselves, but maybe we'll still a bit more time, 5 to 6 minutes, and because I would also like to hear at least 2 contributions from the floor before we wrap up. Over to you, Mahlet, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Doctor. So I'll come in as a contributor to this book and as a co-writer of a chapter entitled From Ratification to Implementation of the FCFTA, What We Have Learned in the State Parties. So I just want to say, based on that chapter, the chapter discusses the elements needed to ensure effective implementation of the agreement, but also highlights the challenges to the implementation so far. So I just want to mention some key elements discussed in that chapter to also answer or add on the discussion we just had. So one of the key elements in advancing the FCFTA, of course, has been the commitment and the political will of the member states, with, of course, the 54 countries that have signed the agreement and 44 that have ratified as of today. Besides, it has been mentioned, several member states and regs have also developed their AFCFTA implementation strategy, and they have started implementing some activities. Some member states have also established their AFCFTA national committee that will enable them to oversee the implementation, but also the monitoring of the agreement. And recently, the Guided Trade Initiative is also a great example of member states' political will to start trading under the FCFTA. So, and now, because the negotiations are going to finalization, the need to double the effort to implement is crucial. And this has been mentioned as well by Dr. Grace. So there are several challenges to be addressed, of course. One being we need all the countries to ratify. Of course, there are the trade barriers, harmonization of trade rules and practices across the continent, the issue of infrastructure, including the digital infrastructure mentioned by Dr. Maktar, technical capacity gaps, limited awareness around the FCFTA issues, and also limited capacity and involvement of the private sectors. And here I would like just to mention some of the main policy recommendations that come out from this chapter. So one is the need for an integrated institutional and policy framework for implementing the agreement. So integrated institutional mechanisms, of course, entails the need for coordination and collaboration among all the relevant entities. We have the FCFTA Secretariat. We have at the continental level, there is a need to all countries establish their FCFTA national committee, the same as the REC level. Of course, policy coherence and alignment among the various policies and strategies. This has been also mentioned. There is a need for capacity building and awareness so that all the stakeholders understand the implication of the agreement. Complementary actions to address trade barriers and increase productivity capacity is needed so that businesses are able to produce and trade competitively under the agreement. And finally, ensure, as it has been said, inclusive but also sustainable implementation of the agreement, which entails all stakeholders to be involved, but also current issues such as climate change to be addressed. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mahlet, for that contribution. I hope you're not putting us back in the box in terms of the captures as outlined by Joy, but I think important to make sure that we still do have the necessary instruments that would help in the implementation. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but I want to take the time to the floor in case there are any contributions, questions. Okay, so we have 4. I think we will end with that. We'll start with Stanley there, and then we go in the room before we wrap up. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Eunice, and the rest of the panel. I just want to really single out Joy to congratulate her because this is really at the heart of what I wanted to say. From my past life working on trade issues in ECOWAS, I think you struck a great point. And there are few low-hanging fruits we need to really capitalize on. We were working on the trade liberalization scheme, and one of the things that we had to look at was the community value added to be able to harness the trade potential within the ECOWAS community. Many of the community members were producing, but they didn't have the certification at the time because it wasn't a proof as to whether the inputs they were using were within the community. And so we had to link them to other institutions, especially for Ghana at the time, in order to be able to have some of them to succeed. But there are other barriers that are actually not enabling the issue of non-tariff barrier. Most of the time we see exploratory visits within the community. I want to come to invest here, but the first visit I want to do is exploration of what exists here. But the orientation of our movement, acceptance of our movement is not within the community, within Africa. We tend to give more favorable preferences to people external to the community in terms of movement of people. These are the non-tariff barriers. But my visit could be just to explore what exists in Seychelles or Mauritius and so forth, and to go back and plan. We haven't taken stock of the opportunity of doing joint ventures among ourselves. There is a country that has so much desert. There is a country that has fertile land. What is stopping us from those two countries engaging in joint ventures in agriculture? These are low-hanging fruit. This morning we talk about the issue of the blue economy. We used to say trade is not enabling within the community because we have homogeneous products. But at least if I have oceans and you don't have, what stops you from engaging in a business with me that has ocean and importing from me? I just want us to look at this low-hanging fruit and ensure that we can harness the potential of this AFTA. Over to you.
Much, Stanley. I think we had a point here.
I have a mic already. Okay, so
you rigged the mic, but it's fine. You go ahead, George. And then
so
we'll go here.
mine is a question, actually two questions. The first one, I think there seems to be an assumption that with the implementation of the AFCTA, markets will clear and everything will be fine. But I want to use an experience of the East African community, where, for example, we a couple of years ago, we had food shortages. I think it was in Kenya when you have food surpluses in Tanzania, but we couldn't get those movements across. So the first reaction was, I think, without lambasting or criticizing the Tanzanian government at the time, there was actually restriction on food exports to Kenya. Now, how are we going to ensure that these kind of things that actually go beyond market dynamics, it is actually more political than that's the laws of economics put it quote, to ensure that, for example, food markets actually work quote efficiently. That's number one. The second is that with liberalization of markets, opening up borders and so forth, we still have backwash effects. There are some areas that are not as developed in parts of our continent as others. And even within our same countries, there are those pockets where help are required. What role do the panel members see in the role, for example, of a regional development fund to be able to help those lagging sectors and lagging areas? And finally, once we have opened up the borders, and I love those, I want to go to Accra anytime. Once we become one big continent, how are we going to deal with the issues of the global commons, particularly issues around regional public goods? Unless we have a common budget, I see those kind of investments not taking place because our budgets will still be nation focused. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eunice, and for the moderation, and thanks for the panel. My comment is going to focus on something I believe Dr. Atta Mensah passionately presented around free movement of people. It's absolutely important for that to be part of the AFTA, and somehow I feel it's not a surprise that it's one of the greatest challenges that we have. In my opinion, I feel it really depends on who is moving. You and I somehow might be able to easily move, even with visas. My grandmother in the village, who probably is much richer than me, but cannot read and write, may struggle to come to Mauritius and sell granules. We saw this stark reality. The EU was sponsoring or supporting a lot of projects around migration, I rather say anti-migration, given the sad reality of our brothers and sisters that lost their lives on the sea. But when the war in Ukraine happened, the UK and many other European countries were very quick to institute visa measures. So it really depends on who is traveling. I think we have to face this issue with a reality. Our economies are at different scales. It's not about what I like and what I prefer. Some countries are still going to restrict on who wants to travel. I don't have much details on the negotiations or the discussions around the free movement of persons, but I want to imagine whether we've considered the option of a staggered approach of who is moving. If the emphasis is on trade, do we want to emphasize initially on the free movement of traders? If we're going to go large scale and want everybody to be able to move everywhere, we might be facing challenges. So I want to really find out where is the emphasis on the free movement of trade, and can we question ourselves, take a step back and not be over ambitious at the first instance, even if what we really want is the ultimate free movement of everyone else on the continent. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. I'm Tincho Fong from the Ministry of Trade, Cameroon. Thanks for the excellent presentations. But talking of the African Continental Free Trade Area, I wish to inquire what the Economic Commission of Africa is doing, especially for countries that still depend entirely on custom revenues for survival. If there is free trade area, it means they will need other sources of revenue. And equally, we know that our levels of development, even within Africa, is not the same. If I have to take the case of two different countries, what would a country like, say, the Central African Republic, which is one of the most least developed in terms of industrialization, do with multinationals found in South Africa if there is actually the African Continental Free Trade Area to develop its industrial sector too? Because it will be difficult to deal with those multinationals to develop your own small national industries in such countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, and I know there's a lot more interest, but I'm afraid we do not. I don't know what time is lunch. Was it 1 or 1:30 or 2? I think those four will be, maybe we can have bilateral discussions after that. But I want to put you, Stephen, on the spot to take the last question that came from a colleague from Cameroon. If you can respond to that, and then Joy, perhaps you can speak to the levels of the staggered levels of negotiations. I'm assuming that you might have more insights into that. And of course, any other panelists, I think Prof may speak to some of the political issues also raised by ADB in terms of, if you look at AEC, if there are restrictions of exports and so on. And then we will wrap up like that, and you will be given also an opportunity to have your last thoughts. Could we do that in a minute and a half?
Yes, I'll be brief. The question from the colleague from Cameroon on the issue of revenue loss. First of all, there is evidence. A lot of work has actually been done that shows that when it comes to the amount of money that is going to be lost by countries in terms of tariff revenues, it's actually negligible, considering that a lot of our free trade within the regional economic communities has happened. And then again, we don't trade a lot with each other. So when you look at the numbers, if you do a back of the envelope analysis, actually very little money is going to be lost. But any frank loss is to a minister of finance is consequential, because they also have to meet other needs of the economy. So what is the solution to this? The solution is actually simple. The AFCFTA in itself creates economic opportunities. And so you're going to get additional sources of revenue. So as you reduce the tariff take, you're going to have opportunities to get more in terms of VAT, in terms of income taxes, and even in terms of other replacement taxes like excise taxes, which you can get maybe because of further growth of the sectors that relate to sin taxes, taxation. But There is a fund also, I think I need to add here, that Afrexim Bank, and I'm sure even the African Development Bank, they do actually have adjustment facilities that can allow countries to be able to adjust to the revenue losses. So they are instruments. There is a fund by the Afrexim Bank with 3 windows, whereby the government can actually get support for the tariff replacement. And I'm sure the AFDB, as it supports countries to implement the AFCFTA, is also concerned with that. On the last question about multinationals, we have not talked at length about the issue of regional value chains and the industrialization agenda. I think Joy did touch to it in the context of the boosting intra-African trade. It is not the case that the weak economies are going to lose in terms of benefiting from the AFCFTA. Rather, we should look at it by the possibilities of trade in intermediate inputs from one economy to another and reverse of the same, whereby some of these small economies would also be able to be linked, to have linkages with the bigger economy. And in fact, evidence shows that it is the smallest economies and also the economies that are not very large in terms of markets that actually benefit the most from an integration like the one that is being promoted by the AFCFTA. So rather than fearing the AFCFTA, in fact, these small economies should see it as an opportunity because they're going to get a bigger economic space. Thank you very much.
All right, it's working. Thank you very much. The lady at the back asked a question around staggered movement. And, you know, listening to you reminded me of those framing days of how exactly do you land where you are, which is this idea of take what's possible now and then get more later. And I think the staggered approach is in fact what the AFCFTA does right now, which is this idea of anchoring within the treaty the possibility of movement of natural persons for the purposes of supplying services. Now, of course, there's a narrow category of those people. So contractual service suppliers, independent professionals, intra-corporate transfers, graduate trainees. It's a narrow, highly skilled, mostly type of people. On reflection, I think it's the wrong approach. And I don't know, because of the jackets that trade agreements typically have, I don't think you can go further than that in the context of the treaty itself. And therefore, I'd like to think that the solution is really ultimately in the protocol on free movement, because there you have a rights-based approach that I can enter, I can reside, I can establish. And therefore, I think we have to find a way to put huge political advocacy around how to get that agreement out there beyond the 4 that have ratified it right now. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joy, for responding to that question. And I'm also taking it's your last thoughts because I don't think that we will get another opportunity, but then I will go to Dr. Mbiti.
Yeah, thank you. I think the issue of non-tariff barriers has come up, and also the issue of how can we make food markets work. And again, the example given of Kenya and Tanzania is an example of that, of food ban, export ban, and that is an example of non-tariff barriers. So for optimal realization of trade, we will need to address the issue of non-tariff barriers. The complexity of it is because if a country feels it doesn't have enough food or decides to ban exports because they want food for their country, then that makes it more complicated. But that is one of the issues to do with non-tariff barriers, which countries have to address. Thank you.
Thanks so much again, Dr. Mbiti, for your last words, and we'll go to Professor Fantu and then Mahlet also for your last reflections, and then we'll close. And I know that there are a few impatient beings, but at the same time, I see a few more hands, colleagues that wanted to come in. But like I said, I think we can continue to the discussion through lunch, but also other times. So Professor, over to you in a minute and a half, and then please, so that we can wrap up. Yeah.
Sure, I'll be very short. I think I'm very much concerned by the new geopolitics and the conflicting strategies countries are pushed to pursue as a mode of survival. So these conflicting strategies, of course, on one hand, a commitment to have on trade, continental trade. On the other hand, as Joe said, 55 countries are running to Washington next week. Next time the Chinese call another meeting, we'll be running there. Maybe they can throw in a few thousand scholarship here and there. Then comes the Turks. So there is the geopolitics is playing increasing role in terms of diverting critical attention on developing the continental free trade area. I think the whole politics around trade, aid, and investment highly being so much the politicization of it leaves African countries in a very, very difficult situation. So how to remain focused centrally on African designed ideas and strategies will remain a challenge in a situation where there is tremendous changes taking place at the global, in terms of geopolitics in general. So that is my biggest worry in many ways. Thank you.
Agree with you more. Mahlet?
Yes, thank you, Doctor. So as a final word, what I can say is, again, implementation is important. It's a process. We can't wait that everything is perfect, is ready to start implementation. So member states really need to double their effort to start implementation. And it's true that for the CFTA to be successful, additional or other initiatives that have been mentioned, such as the protocol on the free movement of people, right of residence, and so on, but also the African air transport market need to be put in place. So these are points that we need to keep in mind, but still go forward with implementation. Thank you.
Thanks so much again for that. And I will give the last word a minute each, and it has to be a minute, Joe, to both you and Maxa for any final thoughts and words with all that you've heard within the discussion. Over to you.
I'll be very, very, very brief. I think, one, we should accelerate the implementation of the CFTA. I think we're doing too much talk. We need action. I don't believe in the fact that they have this guided trade with 7 countries doing it. All the 44 or 43 countries that have ratified the CFTA should open their channels of trade, and so that trade can effectively take place. It can be done if the will is there. This doesn't mean it costs money to go to World Bank or borrow money to do this. If the will is there, and I think the will is there, the ministers of trade can today say that trade is going to take place amongst ourselves. If that will is there, it will be done. Number 2, I think it is equally important, and I would emphasize again in terms of the free movement protocol. We should put our energies behind the free movement protocol. We did it, we signed it in Kigali, but we've not ratified it. Everyone has signed, a lot signed, but they've not ratified it. So we should move and put that energy that we put behind the CFTA to get it ratified. We only need, the threshold is 15. We have 4. We are left with 11 countries to allow for that to happen. Let's not worry. We worry too much why people don't want to do the free movement, because they think that overnight, the whole of Africa will move to the north. trying to cross the Mediterranean to go to to Europe. It's not going to happen. If people move, there's more migration within Africa than migration outside. So we need to do that. Number 3, capacity. Yes, I know, I'm done. We have to build the capacity, but to build that capacity, because we need skills. We need, for the African that we want has to be well educated. With an African that is well educated, we'll be able to get the Africa that we want. I thank you.
Lastly.
It's my chair, it's for me. I have the floor, chair, or?
Yes, you do, Magda. 1 minute, please.
1 minute. Thank you very much, chair. From what we learn and what we present, for African country to use digital technology to improve the regional value chain, we need to take the risk. Why? The risk in developing the capacity, invest in the infrastructure, develop also the security of the network, and such as the knowledge. Develop a lot of knowledge product for the private sector, for the public sector, and for the youth to be ready for this digital era to boost this regional value chain. We talk about this digital divide, this Gamba digital divide is very important because it's very important. We can't do anything without bridging this digital divide between men and women, between rural area and urban area, between country. Thank you very much.
Okay, good. So this is remote controlled. I can't control it, I'm told, because of the echoes. But again, just to thank you so much, all our presenters and our panelists. I think we really had a fruitful discussion. Like you've seen, I was actually afraid that we'll have half of the room gone by now. But the fact that, people have stayed speaks to the key issues that, have been discussed. So thank you so much to all of you, the presenters, but also the panelists. But most importantly to yourselves for the contributions, for also engaging on this topic. If we could give ourselves, all of us, a hand of applause, but of course also for the presenters. And again, thank you again so much, and hope to see you this afternoon after lunch. Thanks. Yeah. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, lunch will be served at the Senseo restaurant, which is under the lobby. Mesdames et messieurs, le déjeuner est au restaurant Senseo en dessous du lobby. C'est le restaurant principal de l'hôtel. Merci.
In my bag.
Elle commence.